Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with William Huynh. William is helping businesses manage AI at scale and for growth and also for risk management. He worked with KPMG, Ernst Young, Accenture Australia, and until recently with DSGAI Australia. And he has been instrumental in transforming operations and the business transformation through the integration of AI and machine learning technology. So, William, welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast interview today.
Thank you so much, Boris, for having me today.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. So, I believe that we will have a very thoughtful conversation on the topic of how to manage AI risk and maybe some impact on impact of AI on risk management and compliance professionals. But before that, could you tell us a short story about yourself and what you did and what brought you to where you are right now?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. My story is a one that goes into various aspects and various journeys and meandering away to where I am today. Um, but I think the best way to think about it is over the last 8 to 10 years, I've been largely focused on helping organizations transform through emerging technology, whether it was the days of automation, the days of analytics, and the days of dashboards and etc. There's always been this common issue of businesses not truly understanding the impact of what some of these technologies are and what are the risks associated to adopting that at scale. Nonetheless, with the world we're coming at now, you can't turn one corner without seeing the words AI everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone is really interested in it, and people are starting to adopt it. But just like many other technologies in the past, many businesses don't truly can understand the spectrum of risks and concerns and considerations that entails in terms of adopting AI. And what's more interesting is that AI is growing at a speed much faster than nearly any technology that I've seen in the past. Adoption is incredibly quick. New technologies, new evolutions of AI is incredibly quick. That makes the AI risk landscape even more sophisticated and more challenging for companies to work through. So my story has been helping businesses grasp some of these new challenges and sort of helping them drive that transformation and scale as they continue to adopt these new technologies.
All right, fantastic. So let's discuss first with the general question. How do you can you define what AI risk and why it's important for us to address and understand it?
Yeah, I think if I took a step back and tried to define AI, right? I think to look at AI risk, you've got to understand what is actually AI. And I think it's a tall order to define AI because nearly every second day the definition of AI changes because new technologies come up. But how I like to think about it as of today, it helps us frame the conversation of risk for many organizations, is that there's sort of three camps of AI at the moment. One is the more traditional machine learning based AI, the ones that we've been familiar with over the last 10 years or so. And that has been in the background, doing predictions and computer vision and all those other use cases. The other one, which is a lot more topical at the moment, which is generative AI, things that we see from ChatGPT and all the other ones are in everyone's media today. It's the AI that creates, the AI that responds to queries and provides responses back. What we're going to see soon, and it's starting to see in pockets in across industries at the moment, is AI agents, which is autonomous AI that can effectively are driven by some of the latest emerging technologies of AI, but can actually act on processes, on tasks, on functions. So if we took those three broad spectrums of AI, what we start to think about then is for those different archetypes, how do they manifest themselves into businesses? And then when they do manifest, what are the different types of risks that can occur as a result of that? And acknowledging that AI is very different to software, and I'll even arguably claim that AI is so categorically different to software that that software risk management is inadequate for managing AI risk. And I can happily go into a bit more detail around that. But that landscape creates a new need for risk practitioners to think about, well, if I'm putting AI in, what are the different aspects and elements I need to think about in order to make sure it's safe, responsible, and scalable and derives value?
Hmm. So, what are you describe it as a general topic? What are some of the potential risks associated with development and deployment of artificial intelligence? Of course, we know this all this fraud and deep fakes, and what from your perspective are most important from our understanding?
Yeah, I think it's the spectrum that is probably possibly the most important for business executives to grasp. More often than not, in the media, we get shown two or three types of risks, particularly around the ethic considerations, bias considerations, and essentially some of the more existential crisis type of topics of AI, right? Will it take my job and et cetera and et cetera. Although they tend to capture the most attention in the media circuits, what I think is missing in the discourse is all the other risk elements that come with adopting AI. So for example, financial risk, customer experience risk, operational risk. What happens if AIs get decisions wrong? What does it mean to the operational processes of businesses? Human talent risk, essentially all processes that are currently operating in businesses have a degree of risk. And as AIs continue to augment or automate some of those processes, those same risks needs to be revisited in terms of how would AI impact that.
Mhm. So this I will follow with another question related to this. How do you assess the current state of AI risk management efforts, and what are some of the key strategies and approaches to mitigate this risk?
Yeah, it's still a very much growing area in my perspective. If we had this conversation about 6 months ago, I would possibly say that it was a non-existent conversation that was happening in the world. Everyone was really saying, "Oh, I want to do more AI. Give me the next generative robot or widget to plug into my systems." It's starting to get to a point now where people are going, "Hang on, risks are actually quite important for AI. And if I don't get my handle on this at the moment, it's going to run away from me. I'm going to create a spaghetti mess in my organization as I build more AIs, and it'll cost even more to unravel that 3, 5 years down the line." Now, you asked the question, how do how do people start to think about managing this? That is another can of worms to go down into is um, particularly in the area of AIs that are embedded into processes and start to take decisions off uh, well, basically start to take decisions from people in an automated fashion or augmented fashion. AI will start to operate then in that instance at a scale and a speed that is next to impossible to manage manually. You can't, AIs don't sleep. AIs continue to operate 24/7. They continue to use thousands and thousands of data points for each individual decision. Imagine a human manually going through the criteria and data, trying to figure out what AI has done. It's next to an impossible task. So what the industry is now starting to think about is how do you put intelligent tooling across your AI portfolio in an organization such that you can create visibility and transparency in terms of what decisions are AI making and what are the impacts of those decisions if they were to go wrong. So then people can remediate and triage much more effectively if things do go wrong.
Hmm. So that's now we see a lot of regulations, specifically in the EU, about using AI system. Probably it will go to other countries and continents. What role do policymakers and industry leaders and researchers have to play with managing AI risk effectively?
Yeah, there's been a lot of effort and attention globally, possibly spearheaded out of the EU region at the moment around AI regulations. And it's not just EU. The EU has probably the most mature one, but we're also seeing a lot of development in America, in China, and Canada, and the UK as possibly the areas or countries that are leading in the regulations as much as possible. I think it's important for countries to have a view on how do you actually manage the most highest risk systems of AI and to ensure that the AI development in the country is going towards an outcome that is beneficial to humanity as a whole. However, having said that, regulation at that broadest level, I think has really important impacts on what does innovation look like in the country itself. I can't pretend to have the answers, but if you look at other regulations in the past, and other innovations in the past where the governments have tried to regulate it, it's always been the industry moves quickly, the government tries to move as quickly as well, and there's always this sort of balancing act between the two. I think we'll see the same between that where the regulators play a role, policymakers will play a role, but also more importantly, the large industry players would also need to self-regulate, and they have a role to play in terms of shaping what does AI regulation look like. I'll also make a final point as well is I think AI as a general type of capability or technology has a pretty broad impact across the world. We see developments out of the US impacting Australia, where are opposite sides of the world. But regulation is region specific. EU regulation is specific to EU, and same as US regulation is specific to US, and they're all taking different approaches. So we're starting to see a slight divergence in how do different countries treat AI. So it'll be quite interesting come 2 years later, where a lot of these different EU regulations or these AI regulations are matured. What does it mean on a global landscape? That will be a very interesting an area to work through.
Mhm. I would like to ask you a personal point of view based on your broad experience in this space. What are your major misconception in the AI and the risk management specifically that you are strongly disagree with?
Yeah, I think this I think the notion that all my investments in software to date is adequate and enough to manage the AI landscape and AI capability. I think that is although no one really talks about that, I think there's an underlying tone that people feel like they've covered their bases because they put a lot of effort in data security, cybersecurity, and software management. But the challenge that I think is AI is growing to a point where it's starting to transcend the realms of software. I think it's more closer to a human capability than it is a software capability. And purely by basically 2 points that I can draw to. One is that it's dynamic. AI changes and performs differently, creates different outputs depending on the environment in which it operates in. Whereas software, if you don't really make any changes,
Hmm.
theoretically, it should always operate in the same way, right? But AI is not the same. AI from day one degrades, deteriorates. That alone means that the paradigm on how do you manage software capability doesn't really fit how do you manage AI capabilities. The other point is like to call it as a socio-technology rather than a technology. And that socio part acknowledges the the power and impact of AI is due due to the collaboration between humans and machine in that interaction. Take generative AI, for example, right? It can't create all those masterpieces of what we see today without smart prompting and continuous refinement from the humans. Same for AI agents. AI agents will be embedded into processes who would probably end up using humans as an interface to seek information, to get approvals, to get steering. That collaboration is what truly makes AI powerful. And that collaboration is managed more like a human activity rather than a software activity. And just because of so for those two things, I think it creates that misconception that it's more like technology. Whereas don't think it's more like technology. It's actually more just intelligent processes. And I think that is the biggest misconception that we'll be working through in the next 12 months.
All right, fantastic. So, do you have some, can you share some examples, maybe without dropping the names, of successful implementation of AI and maybe also unsuccessful, if you.
Yeah, happy to share some. Over the last 12 months, I've had the privilege to dive deep into some AI scenarios and AI use cases that some of the large enterprises have done. I'll start with the negative side, right? It's always easier to find the to talk about the negative side because I think it creates quite a lot of insight in terms of how should we think about what does good AI look like. And through the last 12 months, by diving deep into some of these models, there was a lot of examples where I found, particularly in areas such as AI used in churn management or customer attrition, right? More the marketing aspects, seeing often missed through the development cycle that particular data points, for example, which are inherently biased or inherently personal information being flown through some of the training and the learning of some of these AI models. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that or you should do that, right? Because there's a whole new debate to go through that. But the question I have is there was very little controls or governance processes in that mix to actually ask the question, what is that risk of including it? And am I comfortable with that risk as a business? Because at the end of the day, businesses are managing risk, right? It can never be completely risk-free. It's just about how do you manage that risk. The lack of questioning and the lack of asking the right questions to the right people with the right processes was what I saw as some of the gaps in some how AIs are implemented today. I've also seen really amazing ones, and I think it's pretty easy to talk to scenarios where you've got some really amazing model making some really amazing predictions somewhere because it's really cool. But I find the ones that are more effectively embedded into organizations as the ones that are much more successful. So for example, there was one particular one, particularly around fraud analysis that I worked with the large insurer. They effectively used a really sophisticated AI model, embedded it into straight into their fraud analysis process, and it was quite seamless how when I saw it, when a human was interacting with the machine, taking the advice and the detections from the machine, and then using that as part of their analysis. And then when there was discrepancies or when there was questions for them to ask, they were able to go back to the machine and to understand to explore that a little bit further. What was very powerful was this back and forth kind of interaction, which further cements AI capability into the process and into adoption. And I think that is where we're going to be seeing more and more what does good AI look like is where it's successfully embedded into processes with the right governance layers around it and the right controls around it, and an excellent experience. So yeah.
All right. Interesting. So let's drill a little bit deeper. So, for example, if we take life or what average risk or compliance managers should do, if there is one thing that they should start to prioritize right now that they are not doing currently, what would it be?
Firstly, I think you should play with AI. I think it's so common out there that you should definitely play with it because the only way to manage it is to start to understand the tendrils and how it impacts your day-to-day work, whether it's your function that you do itself or the advice that you provide to your business around managing risk, right? So I think playing with it is should be number one priority for risk practitioners and everyone beyond that. The other thing I think is to start to look at, I guess, alternate and novel ways of managing risk as a process. The days of manually documenting controls, manually writing processes, manually testing controls and remediation actions. I don't think that paradigm is going to be very efficient and very effective in the land of AI risk management. Now, don't get me wrong, AI is still maturing and it's not completely permeated through all businesses just yet. So there is time, 100% there is still time to learn and to put in place the different pieces to get it right. However, I do think the time is to start now. So ask the question, if you have 100 alerts every single day about an AI going wrong, how would you manage that? If you've got AI models making decisions that have flow-on decision impacts across five different processes, how do you start to create visibility on that chain? Because it's never that one decision stops at that output. It keeps going and going and going. Also, the other question I ask, especially for risk practitioners that are embedded into AI projects, is to start to ask the question on what is the actual business outcome that this AI is trying to develop for? And then how do you link from AI outputs to business outcomes so you can draw visibility on that? What we typically see too often is AI monitoring and AI management stops at the technology layer. So people are measuring things like statistical variances and F1 scores and accuracy scores, but to be honest, they mean nothing to the business. So being able to translate from that paradigm to the next, which is the what does it mean for the business, going through that process is should be what AI practitioners be focus. Oh, risk practitioners should be focusing on right now, as AI is coming more and more common.
Right, right. That's great. Kind of introductory what they have to do. So let's summarize our interview. If someone who's listening would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it's definitely watch this space. It's evolving really, really quickly, and particular with AI risk management. So I think that the two takeaways I think is don't don't necessarily just follow what is hyped at the moment in the media. Have a broader view on what is the implications of AI in business. And I think a risk lens to that is a really powerful way to ask the question, if I put AI in this process or in this function, what are the different impacts that it could make, right? So I think risk practitioners are very, very well versed in that. So I think, taking a broader lens to AI adoption is key for that. The second key takeaway is that, and I didn't think we touch upon this too tightly though, is that risk managing risk is also a function of driving productivity with AI. They're both two sides of the same coin. You can't have productivity without risk, and you have to manage both of them to get to the transformation that you are seeking. So I think don't treat risk management as a way to stop AI. Treat risk management as a way to lay the foundation so that AIs can accelerate in a way that is more conducive to businesses. So I think that is key to that.
Yeah, awesome. So let's remember this point is very, very powerful point. So this were all my question, William. And perhaps if I forgot to ask you something that you think that is important to our audience, please go ahead.
Uh, Yeah, I think firstly, I think, I've really enjoyed this chat. I think it's great to have spend some time with you, Boris, especially in different countries talking about AI and the AI risk elements. Um, I think what we haven't really touched upon is, we've only had the chance to really skirt around the high levels of this. I'd love to be able to spend more time, for anyone who's listening, to talk about how does operationalizing AI look like from a risk perspective? Because it's not just about the models themselves, it's about the system that comes around the AI solution that needs to be thought about. And it's not even just a solution, but it's the process of which AI is developed, the life cycle of AI development. So we never really touched upon that. So I do want to just quickly say then that on that regard is, you know, risk management is a powerful lens to not just assess each of the AI components on their own value, but to assess how AI is done in an organization from development all the way through the operations. And I think we should also take that lens when we go through this. Um, and yeah, and for myself, I'm really excited to see what the next 12 months would hold in the AI world. Nearly every single day, we're seeing new startups coming out of stealth, with new generative models or new AI employees. I think the world of AI 12 months will be so different to what we're seeing today, and uh, we should jump into it and help steer it rather than wait in the sidelines.
Fantastic. So I take your suggestion of topic of operationalizing AI as a next subject, maybe in a few months to discuss with you. And I hope I wish you a great success, and hope we will chat together again on another topic related to your powerful view of on AI.
Thank you so much. And again, thanks for so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye.